You're watching KLTX, Channel 15, serving the city of Lufkin.
Gardening is great fun, it's very relaxing, and the ideal gardener, in my opinion, and I can do 2 out of 3, is a gardener, a chef, and a preserver, canning, freezing, this. If you can do all 3, that's the best gardener in my mind, because you will grow more than you need with time. And even your neighbor will shut off the lights and hide under the bed when they see you coming with another bucket of squash or tomatoes. So learn to make sauces, whatever, jams, jellies, dehydrated, whatever. Eat year round, pickling, all that. I know organic practices are very popular with master gardeners, so I have lots of different presentations. I thought I'll choose this one, and you will get a copy of this. I will leave a copy, PDF file, so don't worry about writing. There will be some names of products that you can use, so don't worry about writing any notes. You can get a copy. Just ask Gary. Okay. Organic. What is organic? Anybody? Anybody believes that if I say round up twice you faint? That's fine. That is fine. I have no problem with it. But if anybody believes that organic means spraying nothing, is wrong. There are lots of organic pesticides that you need to use. Because if you want to be like grandma, spray absolutely nothing, you will get nothing. You will get 10% of the yield if you're lucky. If you're happy with that, great, do that. But even 100 years ago, and I did talk to a lady once, she was 90, and I said, what did you do when you were a kid before pesticides were invented? What did your parents do? What do you remember? She said they used to collect the washing dishes in the bucket under the sink. They didn't have plumbing. And so she was using insecticidal soap that you buy at the store now. They used to take the fireplace ashes and dust it on the plants. It's things that, so even then they did something because they knew you had to do something. So organic doesn't mean do nothing or au naturel, or, no. There are organic pesticide options that you can use if you want a crop. There's some funny slides, but it all starts with the soil. Okay, you saw the picture of my 2 raised beds, the very first slide. I had to look it up on the internet. I got compost from Tyler, built a raised bed, filled it with compost, and it's ready to go. Instant garden. Great soil, easy to work with, good compost. So if your soil is iffy, like where is the soil? This is the soil pyramid, and you can get it tested, or you can go online and enter your address and it'll tell you what's your soil type. If you're interested in that, we can tell you. But even if you have 100% clay, you can garden in it, but don't. That's for advanced growers. Okay, that's like the 10 o'clock gumbo. You heard that expression? 9:55 is too wet, 10:05 is too dry. So you have to know what time to garden. So if you want peace of mind, stay on the sandy or any type of soil that has loam in it. Then you have a good soil. If you want to work with your native soil. In East Texas we have a lot of sand, that's great. That's easy to work with, easy to garden. But you think you're fertilizing the plant, but you're really fertilizing the soil. Adding compost is feeding the soil, and then the soil feed the plant. Okay? Because you think you see a earthworm and you say, oh, I got good rich soil. But for every earthworm you see, there's millions and billions of animals, life that you don't see. like the fungi, the good nematodes, the good bugs, the good bacteria, the good viruses that are breaking down the mulch, the organic matter to feed your plants. Okay? So when you add compost, that's what you're doing. And compost doesn't mean animal manure or plant material compost. Okay? And so how do you feed the soil? Try not to till too much. So if raised bed, you should, if you know you have good garden, if you can do with your hand like this to dig a hole and plant. Try not to disturb too much. If, of course, native garden, you have to till it, this, to control the weeds. That's why I build a raised bed. You want to enjoy gardening, not have a 5-year plan to fix the native soil. It's not worth the headache, okay? Enjoy the garden. Use mulch, feed your soil with more compost. I tell everybody, the last thing you want to do before planting is add more compost. So if you plant 3 crops, one after another in a year, you add compost 3 times. Not once, 3 times. Okay, so organic matter in the soil increased by this, decreased by tillage. And no matter what you do, we have hot and humid conditions in Texas, so that's what's breaking it down. And you want it to break down because you know that it's being fed to the plant. That's why I tell you, add more every time you plant. Don't add once and then say, oh, that's good for 3 years. No, it'll be gone. I did a trial one time when I was in College Station, and I was 80% organic matter one year. Next year was 30%. Third year was 5%, which is a little bit higher than what we have native organic matter in our native soils here. So it can disappear that fast. Okay, forget about composting. We have an expert on composting, but unless you do it right and make it a full-time job, I'd rather you buy it than try to compost. Because all the compost I see by most people, it's a trash can for the vegetable garden, not really a compost pile. So buy it and get it, it's easier than you try to make it. Of course, on a small size, if you have a small amount that you can, then one of these are nice because a small amount goes in and it's ready in a week or 10 days. So that's nice. But if you want to build a bin and wait a year to fill it like this, that's a trash can, okay? This is a nice compost pile because steam coming out of it. But this is an organic farm in Austin, and he just moves it with a bucket and a tractor from one place to another. Less work. You want less work so you can spend more time doing what really counts. Not spend the whole day shoveling this from one side to another. You don't have energy to do anything else. All right? Of course, I'm not going to talk too much about composting in this presentation. Mulching is very important, just as much as composting. And here's what you can use here. And I found that if you want to start with a native garden, start with cardboard, mulch with cardboard. Nothing grows through cardboard. You have weeds that will puncture through plastic, that will grow through 4 inches of mulch. But you put cardboard, that will stop anything. Of course, it's ugly as sin. You sprinkle a little bit of mulch on top of it, and it'll be fine. So get those big TV boxes, open them, put them in the area where you want to plant, dig holes, put your tomato in there. Of course, after you've done taking care of the soil and the fertilizer and the compost, and all that, and use cardboard. That's the best thing. And then you'll see a year later, you have no weeds growing through there. But anything. If you want to use mulch, it's not an inch thick, that's decoration. 6 inch thick, so stop the light from reaching the soil, so no new weeds germinate. Okay? Plant selection, Carrie gave you a handout that has the plant varieties we recommend for your area. But look at the planting guide. And this is Travis County, but every county should have one. We have one for Overton. You'll see that every month we can have something growing in Texas. Every month you can have something growing. This tells you the planting window, and the pointed ends is like iffy. You know, you can try it. You'll see that the planting window for all these crops is minimum a week and sometimes 3-4 months. So if you like sweet corn, don't plant all the sweet corn at once. Plant some today, some a week later, some a week later. This way you don't have too much sweet corn at once and you get tired of eating sweet corn. Tomatoes, onion, all of those, spread them out. This way, squash, maybe not tomato, forget tomato. Everything but tomato. You want to go as early as possible in all of them. But onion, squash, cucumber, plant them this way. They don't. The harvest spreads out. Now you plant them 2 weeks apart. You harvest them a week apart because they catch up and grow. But at least you don't have a lot of cucumber, a lot of squash, a lot of eggplants at the same time. This is a beautiful organic garden in Austin again. This is a strip of, I forget the name, but you can harvest some and eat it. But this is, he calls it green manure. So he can disc it in, and that will rot and become fertilizer for the following crop. But most importantly, that acts as competition, so there's no weeds growing. So learn that from commercial growers. Your raised bed should never be empty. Crop, cover crop. Crop, cover crop. You want to grow it over the winter, grow nothing over the winter, sprinkle some, I don't know, what grows in the winter? Wheat, barley, rye. Let it sprinkle it thick, and when it gets too big, weed eat it, let it grow, weed eat it. This way, that is competing with the weeds, competing with the diseases, and everything that you cut or is feeding the soil. And then when you're ready to plant, a week, 10 days before you plant, kill it, shallow disking, and plant in there. Or add more compost on top, let it suffocate it, kill it, and then plant on top of it. This is a list of organic fertilizer available. Again, don't worry about what's writing anything. And this is the application rate we recommend. You'll see probably the highest one in terms of nitrogen is guano or blood meal. And from this slide, I also want to tell you that if you see a organic fertilizer that's 20% nitrogen, they're cheating you. There's nothing natural that's 20% nitrogen. I mean, look, blood meal, maybe 12, maybe 13, whatever, but they're all low. And since it's not regulated, they can spike it and call it Joe's Miracle Organic Fertilizer and get away with it. So if you want to be purist, pay attention to that. Here's some more organic fertilizers. See, fish meal, bone meal are high. Of course, they're more expensive than chemical fertilizer, but the plant doesn't know the difference. Unless you're purist and you have to be organic, then get whatever fertilizer that work and focus on insecticide, fungicides that are organic instead of chemical pesticides. Just feed them fertilizer that works. Plant doesn't care, doesn't know the difference, and it's a lot cheaper. Okay, any gardener has to deal with these big three: weeds, insects, and diseases. And I love this weed whacker, his grandpa with a sickle controlling the weeds. How do you control weeds organically? Cover crop. Put some rye on the bed, that will control the weeds because it's competing with the weeds. Mulch, smother cropping, mowing, Many organic growers that I know on the commercial scale, they don't care about weeds in the alleyway. Doesn't have to be clean. They just mow it so it doesn't go into seed. That's what they care about. So mowing is a good way. Hoeing, flaming, that's not for us. Oh, that's not, sorry, I'll come back to that. I'll come back to this. Any questions on weeds? Weed control in the fall is very important. People forget their garden in the fall because they don't want to plant garden. But pigweed that germinates in the spring and gets this big before it starts to make seeds, in the fall it's this big and makes seeds because of the day length, and so it goes into seed quick. And that weed that you ignored it, put back at least 100 seeds back in the garden. So you'll never win the war against weeds. In Michigan, I learned an expression: 1 year of seeding is 7 years of weeding. So don't let them go to seed. With time, you would win the war against weeds. That's why I told you many organic commercial operations mow. Weeds. This weed doesn't bother me. I just don't want it to put back 1,000 or 5,000 seeds back in the soil for next year. Disease is also something you have to address. That's why I tell you, you have to spray something. Weeds, you see it, you kill it. Insect, you see it, you kill it. Weeds, diseases, when you see them, it's too late. So many pesticides for disease control that we have, organic or otherwise, are to prevent the disease, not to cure it. So that's why even organic operation, they spray every 7 to 10 days. Not to fix the disease, to prevent it from happening. Okay? And if anybody tells you that a healthy plant, if I do everything right, I will not get a disease, he's dreaming. Okay? Because the disease requires 3 things: host, pathogen, and environment. The host means the plant. It doesn't tell you the plant has to be sick or not enough fertilizer or not enough water. Just that tell you it has to be there. So the plant is there, the disease specific for that plant is there, and the right environment. Warm, humidity, things like that. So let's say I have on my eyeball right now a spore of powdery mildew. I may have that, but it's not gonna grow because I'm not the right host, right? So host, plant, the disease, and environment. And the plant does not have to be sick for that disease to infect it. So prevention is the key. So yes, good cultural practices, everything, you do things right, helps reduce the disease from starting. But if it rains every day and it's humid, you will have disease, you will have mildew. Okay? In wet years, you worry about downy mildew or rots. In dry year, you will get powdery mildew. You familiar with these two? If you don't, look them up, learn about them, because we have few diseases that you will expect every year. Powdery mildew, downy mildew, blossom rot, stem rot, gray mold, depending on, you don't have to learn every single disease, just start with the one that are most common. So even mulching is a form of disease prevention, because buckeye rot, the rain splashes dirt on the lower leaves, and that gets the infection started. So you put a little bit of mulch that separates the soil that may have the disease from the plant to get infection. Okay? I tell every gardener, your tomato plants, when you start having fruits on them, don't let any leaf touch the soil. You have to strip all the leaves that are in the first foot from the ground. This way it aerates it, and no leaves touch the ground to avoid diseases from starting. But the easiest way to fight diseases is switch variety. There are lots of new varieties coming on the market all the time that have disease built in them. Not through GMO, if you're worried about that, through normal breeding. Tomato that's resistant to powdery mildew, resistant to nematode, resistant to fusarium, things like that. Cucumber, eggplants. That's the easiest way. Switch to another variety. Look at the catalog, read the description, see what's built in it, and plant that instead of going to Lowe's or any garden center and buy what's available. So a good gardener end up being your own seed starter. You buy seeds and you grow your own plants because you don't find what you want at the garden center, the variety that you want at the garden center. Okay, so a little bit more about disease control is the best approach to disease control is a comprehensive approach. So all of those together, instead of just relying on, I'm using raised beds because the soil drains and my roots don't rot. Okay, that takes care of roots, but what about the leaves? So then maybe resistant variety, spraying something, sanitation. We don't think about sanitation too much. Anybody has a hose in their garden? Yeah, no? Nobody has a garden hose? Is your garden hose, do you ever leave it on the ground? Okay, great, thank you. It should never touch the soil. Why? Because it may catch something from the soil and then you go like this and water the garden, you're spreading that disease everywhere on the rest of the garden. And anybody, when they clean up the garden at the end of the season, maybe take a 5% bleach solution and spray the cage or tomato cage or spray the stake or spray your tool. Anybody ever wash their hoe at the end of one person? I hope next time all of you say, yeah. I have a picture of me in the sink washing the hoe and my kids say, oh Dad, you're OCD. I told them, well, that's a habit, I dug here, or pruners, I cut this plant that's sick. I gotta sanitize it because I go there and I infect it next time. Even a year later, it may infect it. Those are what I mean by sanitation, those little tips to prevent the disease. Another way of sanitation is what I call prevention. Any plant I buy from the store, I spray it. I call it quarantine. I spray it before I plant it. It looks nice at the garden center, but it may have an insect egg or it may have a disease spore that you don't see. And then you bring that to your garden. And good luck getting rid of it. So before it goes in my garden, I spray it, neem oil, organic or inorganic, sanitize it before I plant it. Okay? So sanitation, here's ideas of sanitation. After you harvest the last fruit of a tomato, that tomato is a weed. So either remove it, mulch it, compost it, or burn it, whatever. Don't just leave it there because you're not eating fruits from it, but the diseases are feeding on it, insects are feeding on it, and then you have more next year. Control weeds, start with disease-free seeds and transplant. That's why I told you I spray my plants. Spray 5-10% bleach solution on the plant support structures. You don't know. I'm organic in my raised bed, but everything outside my raised bed, if I could use Agent Orange or or napalm, I would. I spray the strongest stuff on the post, on the gravel, on the path, on the bushes. I'm not eating there, because that bug will feed there, and then come back to your garden. So I'm exaggerating. I'm trying to make it funny, but get the message that yes, be careful. Spray here, but spray everywhere else too. Because that bug will leave, stink bug will leave your tomato when you spray, but will feed somewhere else and then come back a week later when it senses it's safe. The smell is not there to bother it. And destroy, bury crop debris. That's always good idea. Before you plant, here's some ideas. Choose a good site, get a soil test. if you're a new gardener, I want you to get a soil test at least twice, 2 years in a row, this year and next year, and see what's happening to the soil. Okay? If 2 or 3, or 1 now, 1 2 years later, if the numbers are the same, great. If the numbers are higher in the second time, then you're adding more fertilizer than you're removing, and that's not good long term. Cut down on the fertilizer. If the numbers are lower, I mean, not plus or minus 5%, that's normal, but 20% lower, then that's not sustainable. If you keep doing that, that soil will die because you're removing more than what you're adding. Ideally, you want that numbers to be plus or minus 5-10% from each other. You know that soil is sustainable. 50 years later, it will be just like the first time you planted. You know what I mean? Okay. If you worry about nematodes, there are tests that will tell you if you have parasitic nematodes. Cost you $20, but this way you know to avoid that spot, or spray something, or solarize, or do something to control it. And rotate crops is always the best idea to avoid diseases from getting established. Okay. Do you know that almost all the vegetables we grow fit into 9 families? Do you know, like onion and garlic are related? Yeah? Same family. Did you know that tomato, pepper, eggplant, and potato are the same family? Okay. Do you know that squash, cucumber, all those are grouped into one family, the vine crops? So don't plant cucumber, watermelon, and then, oh, let me put a cucumber after it, squeeze it before the freeze. Those are the same family. And if you search online vegetable families, I think I have a slide, but if I don't, then search online vegetable families and you'll see what is related to what. Okay? I mean, this is in Beaumont. You can't plant anything here, right? Even if you put a raised bed here and it rains, is there a good site for raised bed? No, raised bed will become a mud marsh and you can't grow. But 50 feet to the side, that's the garden. 1 foot of compost that was built over time. He composts his rice hulls and adds it. And actually the alleyway is his compost factory. He adds mulch, he adds fertilizer or rice hulls or whatever he has, the plant debris, adds it there, and then a year later it's rotted, digs it up, puts it on top of the bed, adds more mulch. Best garden ever. Get a soil test. That's $10 to $20 depending what you ask for. In SFA they have a lab, and in College Station we have a lab. So Carrie has a form if you want to send a sample. Okay, this is what I mean by crop rotation. Whether you have a raised bed or 4 raised beds, switch between one variety to another. Oh, here it is, the vegetable families. So the cole crops, the cabbage, the broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, you realize, I mean, you know they are the same family, right? But did you know that radish and turnip and mustard are also in that same family? Some, I mentioned these, I mentioned onion, garlic, leeks. Beet and spinach are the same family. Carrot, celery, cilantro, the vine, all of those are the same family. So here's an example of a good rotation and a bad rotation. Okay, imagine those are whether a year or 4 raised beds. Tomato followed by spinach, bean followed by mustard, cantaloupe followed by onion. Each one of these is a different family. So in year number 4, when you start with tomato again, between tomato and tomato there's 5 crops and 2.5 years. There are some insects that are generalist and diseases that are generalist, but the serious ones are specific. They prefer a tomato, like a tomato hornworm, It's called the tomato hornworm because it prefers a tomato instead of corn, even though they're right next to each other, right? So in that 2.5 years, you starve that tomato hornworm. It's not there to feed on it. So it's rather go somewhere else. Or a disease. You're not feeding it too much so that by the next time you come back with tomato, there's plenty of it. Why this is bad rotation? Tomato followed by potato. This is the same family. Next year they switch to a different family, but those are the same family, and these two are the same family. So in year 4, when you start again with tomato, instead of 5 crops, different crops, you have 2. And instead of 2.5 years, you have 2 years. So the risk, the chance of the disease or the insect being higher numbers when you come back with tomato is much higher here than here. You understand the logic? It's all about odds, about risk, increasing the risk, having nature favor you. And this is too complicated to go over. We don't have the time, but let me describe it to you. This is a 4-year rotation. Here I have the name of the crop and the planting date and the harvest date, planting date and the harvest date. Of course, this may vary from one town to another, but it'll show you that, for example, you'll see that there's no dead time at all. It's always crop, cover crop, carries, August 15 till May 15, and then buckwheat, cover crop, another cover crop, and then cabbage over the fall, carries next year, tomato, solarize or wheat, showing you that, and then when 2 crops follow each other, it's a different family. This could be 4 different raised beds, so all of those could be at the same time. So let's say in May, or in June, you have here snap beans, this one will have veg, this one will have tomato, and this one will have buckwheat. So it could be 4 beds at the same time, or 1 bed over 4-year cycle. If you can reach that stage and design it, you don't like squash or plant something else, if you can reach that stage, you will reduce tremendously the problem with diseases. Insects will always be there. Now, when I say rotation, and you tell me, okay, I have 4 raised beds or 2 raised bed. If you plant tomato here 1 year and then plant tomato there at the very end the next year, are you gonna confuse the sting bugs? Like, oh, I can't find it. Oops. No, it'll find it. Okay. Or a disease that blows with the air. It'll find it here, it'll find it there. So in a limited space or in a garden situation with raised beds, don't worry about the insects or worry about the soil diseases or nematodes. Because if you have a nematode here, if you move the tomato 3 feet away or 2 feet away, it's safe. Because nematode 1 inch is like a year worth of travel. So then you say, okay, no more tomatoes in this spot. You move it 2 feet away, that's a good rotation to avoid soil diseases and nematodes. Mulching is here in College Station, we put 6 inches of chips before we could control, and no weeds grew through that at all. And this was a trial on different types of compost, and this is heavy clay soil. And the best one was this new product that was based on coconut coir. And I tell you, a month, even 2 months later, you can put your finger through that soil like hot knife and butter. Whereas this native soil that was clay, you see just a little bit of irrigation and water was puddling, but 8 inches deep was still bone dry because it's heavy clay. Compost works like magic. If you have heavy clay soil that doesn't drain, it will make it drain better. If you have sandy soil that doesn't hold water at all, you add compost, it will make it hold water longer. The same compost. Here's mulching, rice hulls, anything you can do will work great. Plastic mulch will work great. Imagine the whole garden, the whole field with solid weeds. And it can be if you do nothing. Anybody heard of solarization? Okay. No? You want to know about solarization? Solarization is the idea of steam cooking the soil. Okay, so that will control weeds, that will control insect eggs, and we are lucky in Texas is that your tomatoes end in July. And then you can go back for a fall garden sometimes in August, September. So we have a window that we can solarize at that time. And it's not the heat that works, it's the sunny days that works. Because I solarize over the fall, a longer period of time, but more than 4 weeks, but it does work too. What do you need to solarize? And this is a raised bed that's being solarized. Clear plastic. I mean, it looks white, that's the angle of the picture. Clear plastic, a lot of water, because you want steam, a lot of water, and 4 weeks of sunny days. That's it. I took, on Aggie Horticulture, we have a publication that I prepared from a trial that I did. I was getting 180 degree Fahrenheit every day for like 3-4 hours. That kills the microbes, the worms, the insect eggs, the weed seeds. Not every single one of them, but a lot of them. It will kill the good and the bad microorganisms in the soil, right? But what is the last thing you do before planting? If you remember, I said, what do you do? Add compost. You add compost, you're putting back the good microorganisms that you may have killed with the composting. Okay? So here's a trial I did, 10 by 10 square feet. This was solarized, 83 days, maybe 1 or 2 weeds. This was not solarized. So this is what this could have been. And that's a native garden, never been planted, nothing. And this is the same plots the following spring, only this whole thing is one plant. So only the perennial plants that came up from deep roots that survived, whereas 1,000 grass seeds germinated from that plot. Okay, so here there's probably 5-10 plants that perennials that you can cut and get rid of them versus. So does it work? Yes, it works. Just remember, add compost to put back what you have killed. Okay, what else? Now. Here's a couple of products if you have nematodes, that you can spray. I've tried Syncocin. Marigolds for nematode control. You've heard that? Yeah, does it work for you? It doesn't work. It doesn't work. Okay, I've seen beds where there's one marigold at the edge of the bed. It's not magic. It's not gonna exude and then spread over. No. The way marigold works, if you have a spot here, like in a large garden, you plant a circle of marigold around it, then that nematodes will never get out of that spot. That's how it works. Okay? So, you have a raised bed. If it gets really, really bad, no matter what you do, solarization, spray this, spray that, dig it all up, throw it away, and refill it. Don't try to fix a problem. You're there to garden, to have fun, not to fix a problem. Learn. Some mistakes are unfixable. There are some soil diseases like southern blight that if you get it, you cannot plant there for 10 years the same crop. 10 years. Dig it up, throw it away, refill with new material and enjoy it. And don't get attached to plants. You're not married to it. Gardeners are the eternal optimist. If it's sick, it's gonna get better. No, it's not gonna get better. Pull it out, learn a lesson from it, plant something else, and trust me, you'll feel better. Okay? Do not use tobacco. Why do you want to use tobacco in a garden? Because remember, tobacco and tomato and potato and pepper are same family. The virus that's in the tobacco cigarette will survive the flame of the cigarette and may end up being in the garden. What's the chance of happening? 1 in a million. But in a commercial operations, you're not allowed to chew or smoke inside a greenhouse because the risk is higher. Okay? Clean your equipment. We talked about that. I'm not going to read through this, but you'll get a copy of this, but I'll describe what this table. This is the name of the product. This is the disease that it will control. And this is the labeled crops that it's labeled for. GH means greenhouse. So for example, if you have a stem rot, any stem rot, mycostop will work on any vegetable, also inside the greenhouse. Because some crops, being in confined space, they're not allowed because it may be a hazard for you. That's what that table means, okay? GH is greenhouse. Serenade is available at markets. I think if you're interested in organic option, make sure you have that. Actinovate is available. Get it. Those two, no, those are expensive. But between Actinovate, Serenade, and neem oil, you should have more than one product, pesticide or insecticide, because you don't want the bugs to get used to what you're spraying and form immunity to it. Okay? You should have 2 or 3 fungicides, 2 or 3 insecticides, and rotate the use just like you rotate between the plants. If you've heard of Bordeaux mixture, here's the recipe on how to make it. It's great to control common fungi and bacterial blights. Just remember to make enough for use. Don't make 50 gallon to use over the next 5 years. It will be deactivate. Mix like 2-3 gallons and then use it up and mix. And here's the recipe to make 1 gallon, okay? If you can find copper sulfate, you just need copper sulfate and some lime and some water, and it's ready to use. For insects, here's ideas. Remember, some you've seen: trap, covers, sanitation. But you'll be surprised how many calls I get about aphids and especially about mites. Mites, water pressure will kill them. Water pressure will kill them. Or wetting the foliage will kill them. Remember I told you on a dry year you'll have problem with powdery mildew. You'll also have a problem with mites. So it wouldn't hurt to, I don't recommend watering, with a hose, but once in a while it'd be nice to wash the plants. You get rid of the dust, you get rid of the mites, you get rid of this, that, and will clean, the plants will kind of simulating rain, especially in a dry year. But most of your irrigation should be on the ground. Spinosad, neem oil, insecticidal soap. Remember, 90-year-old lady using soap. You can buy insecticidal soap. So just like Serenade and Actinovate, get some BT, get some insecticidal soap, get some spinosad. You'll have no problem. Few problem with insects. Some things you cannot control. Grasshoppers. You spray them with any of these, it's like a shower for it. Okay, you need something stronger. Okay, I'm not going to read too much of this stuff. And some problems are unfixable. Just like a virus, they'll tell you, oh, you have a flu, go home and rest. You cure it, it'll take 10 days, a week. You do something, it'll be better in a week. You do nothing, it'll be better in 7 days. Same thing with plants. If you have a virus plant, all of them are healthy. One plant is stunted, leaves look mutant. It cannot be a disease, because why not all of them are sick? It could not be an insect, why all of them are not sick? It's a virus. Viruses are unfixable. That's why I told you, don't get it attached to it. Pull it out, get rid of it, and plant something else. Trap crops. Trap crops is a great idea to get the plants. Hey guys, don't go here, go here. Like I always loved to sleep in the same room with my sister when we were kids, because mosquitoes for some reason liked her more than me. When I slept alone, they come to me. When I slept next to her, I had no problems. So that's a trap crop. Attract her and avoid me. You can do the same with plants, and here's some examples. White eggplants will protect the tomato or the purple eggplants from the beetles. What I don't have here is sweet alyssum attracts aphids more than the tomatoes. Sunflower attracts sting bugs more than the tomato. So if you have a big garden, plant on the fence some sunflower as a trap crop. And then you can spray 7 whatever to kill them here, and you're not spraying 7 on the tomato that you want to eat. Okay? Mesh netting, there are mesh or nets that will not let a grasshopper in or even a beetle, and some are even that fine enough that won't let an aphid go through, but they shade too much. So those are available. But most importantly, keep records, make sure whatever problems you have is a learning experience so it doesn't happen again. Okay, you don't want to be a 30-year gardener with 1 year of experience repeated 30 times. Okay, you want to every time learn. And trust me, even after many years of gardening, some years are total disaster. Because no matter what you do, the climate doesn't work with you. Whether it's too much rain or too dry or a grasshopper that move in, no matter what you do, they'll eat everything. There are some things that will happen, but in general, it should be learning experience. And if you keep records and you say, oh, the first squash bug or squash vine borer I saw on this date, then you can start scouting next year on that date. And if you can find the brown eggs on the bottom of a squash leaves, here's my squash bug, and you crush them with your thumb, that's the best organic control, and you didn't even spray anything. Just because you knew from your notes that this is the first time I saw them, and in a small garden is doable. You can't imagine a 100-acre operation, the grower flipping every leaves, not possible. Here's an example of the matted row cover. Agribon is a brand name. It's like felt material that shades but lets enough light for the plants to grow. I use it in the spring to warm up the air pocket underneath them, and I use it in the summer when you plant the cole and cabbage and all that to cool down the plant so it doesn't stress when you plant cabbage or broccoli in September when it's still 100-degree weather in Texas. And in the summer, another benefit is that this is a physical barrier against all the grasshopper or the fall armyworms that are present. Okay? Here's a list of some insecticides that are organic, what they control. Spinosad is one. BT is popular and it works great, but only on the worms. It doesn't control the adult stage, only worms. Okay? Neem oil is great, but be careful when it starts getting 80 degrees, don't use it anymore because it's oil. It can burn the plant. You've heard of summer oil? Anybody heard of summer oil or horticultural oil? That's a great option. It doesn't burn the plant, just as good as neem oil, but you can use it year-round. You're basically spraying oil to suffocate the bugs or the disease so it doesn't multiply. Is the active ingredient of neem oil. Here's something like BT, but it's fungus. It's a fungus that you spray to kill the insect. So BT is a bacteria that you spray to kill the insect. So using nature to fight nature. And there are some good viruses that you can buy to control, like this one is specific for beet armyworm. Now this may not be for the beginning gardener, but information is there for you if you reach that stage and you're willing to invest in that. And there are some parasitic nematodes that you can buy to control insects, soil insects, soil-borne insects. Pyrethrin is a good one. I'm not going to read all these because you'll get a copy. We don't have too much time, but I want to show you my list with pictures of what I have. Oh, that was out of place. Picture. Weed control, hey, cover crop, solarization, you don't want to weed too much, especially if you have raised beds. If you have raised bed and if you have weed problem, ask yourself, what am I doing wrong? I'm not planting thick enough. I'm not, maybe the seeds, you are doing something wrong. Maybe, not, especially if you filled it with compost. Where did the weed come from? So you are doing something wrong. In a native garden, it already has weeds, so you have to deal with that. There are some herbicides that are organic. They're listed here, and those really work best, but only if the weed is this big. I sprayed them. If the weed is this big, that's great. Doesn't do anything. So hoeing is still the best option for organic weed control. This is my favorite, and I have that because you weed forward and you weed backward. And the best time for weed control is when the weeds are barely an inch tall, because then you can put the hoe, even the regular hoe, on the soil and you're just shaving. If you have to dig, it's too late. So sharpen it and put it there, and basically you're giving the soil a shave to disturb that top inch and kill all those weeds before they get established, and then you have to dig them. It's too late then. Flamer can work. Basically, you're burning the leaves. It's better on broadleaf. Grasses can tolerate some heat, but hey, you got a propane tank on the back. It scares me. Maybe you're more courageous. There's lots of options, different kind of mulch that are biodegradable. Those work great, based on coconut coir. These are great for tree or a small shrub. I don't use mulch on my raised bed, as you saw in the very first picture I showed you, because whatever few weeds here and there, I'm in the garden all the time. And you see one, you pick it up immediately. I don't let them get established and then worry about them. And then next year, I add more compost. If there's any few weeds, I basically bury them. You should never have a problem with weeds in the raised bed. Ask yourself, what am I doing wrong? Well, you left it 6 months growing nothing. Of course, weed moved in and established, and one put 1,000 seeds in there. Next year, you have 100 weeds germinating. That's basically what you're asking yourself. Okay, here's some of the products I have. Doesn't mean they are the best, but I want to teach you that it's an organic product. If it has this symbol here, that's like 3 leaves, in case it doesn't say organic. I mean, this clearly says for organic, but it has this leaf. Or it has 1 leaf. Okay, or it'll say OMRI, Organic Material Research Institute. Okay, that is definitely organic certified. And another clue sometimes with the insecticide is it'll tell you what will kill. Okay, it'll tell you it'll control worms, adults, and ants. Or it'll tell you here where to use it. So all those are clues for you. Like this one, BT, you see only picture of the worm. Unlike this one, which is spinosad, that shows you the worm and those two. So if you have these beetles in your garden, BT is not going to work for you. Okay, so please read the label that comes on that container and follow it. And don't be generous. If it tells you teaspoon, put teaspoon and a half. It doesn't work. You don't kill 50% more. You're wasting money. It's not gonna work. Okay. In terms of fertilizer, here's one I have: liquid seaweed 001. 0 nitrogen, 0 phosphorus, 1% potassium. Is that fertilizer? No. But it's the micronutrients that in that kelp and all that's what's beneficial to the plant. Okay? This one is John's recipe, 3, 1.5, 2. Okay? It works. but has a little bit. Compared to triple 10, you have to put 3 times to get the same benefit, and it's more expensive. In a small area, it works great, but on a large, do the price, do the math, and you'll see what works for you. But nowadays, Lowe's, Home Depot, Garden Center, all those places, they are selling Miracle Grow organic options. And here is, you see fruits and flowers, so you know it works on all of them. Dipel is same thing as BT, and tells you, see here, tells you, so you know it's only for worm. And I don't know if you can see the edge of that 3-leaf here, so you know that's an organic option. Okay. In conclusion, start with a good soil. Choose the right plants. Choose hybrids that are disease resistant. This way they're fighting the battle for you instead of you trying to control the insects. Plant at the right time, or earlier than what they recommend is better than later. And organic to me means use all the arsenal of techniques available to you. Cultural, biological, chemical, everything, put them together to work for you. And your shadow is the biggest key to success. That's another expression I learned in Michigan. And what does that mean? You're in the garden every day.